You walk into a room and within seconds, without anyone saying anything, without anything actually happening, your entire mood shifts, not gradually, instantly. You felt this before, right? Maybe it was a friend's apartment, maybe a cafe, maybe your own bedroom. On a bad day, the room did something to you. You just never had a name for it. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain is not just in a room. It is reading the room constantly. Every surface, every shadow, every color temperature, the height of the ceiling, the distance between you and the door, your nervous system is processing all of it in the background. You never ask it to. You can't turn it off. And here's the crazy part. This processing doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like thinking. It feels like mood. You walk into a space and you just feel certain way and you assume it's you, that it came from inside, but a lot of times it comes from the room itself. Number one, ceiling height. And I know that sounds random, but this is one of the most replicated findings in environmental psychology. High ceiling triggers what researchers call freedom related thinking. Your brain shifts toward abstract, creative, open ended thought. Low ceiling do the exact opposite. They trigger what's called constrained thinking, what we call locking in, and focus and detail oriented, structured thinking, let's say. Neither one is bad. But here's the problem, most people don't choose which mode they're in. The room chooses for them. A study by Mayers, Levy, and Zhu, I'll put it in the description by the way, found that people in high ceiling rooms perform significantly better on creative tasks, and people in low ceiling rooms perform better on analytical task, the locking in part. Same person, different room, different brain mode, let's say. So think about this. If you're trying to write, brainstorm, or create something, and you're in a cramped low ceiling space, your room is literally working against the thing that you are trying to do. Not because you lack discipline, bro, because your nervous system is responding to the space above your head. Number two, the color temperature of your lighting. And this one's sneaky because you don't think of light as a design choice. Most of you don't. You think of it as just light. But warm light, that yellowish 2700K stuff, signals evening to your system. It tells your body you're winding down, the day is ending. Cool light though, the 100K to 6500K range, signals daytime, alertness and focus. Now think about what most people do. They work late at night under cool white overhead lights and then wonder why they can't sleep. Or they try to focus during the day in a room with warm yellow lamps and wonder why they feel sluggish. The light is sending a signal and your body is following it. You're not lazy, you're just a little wrong. Let me give you a quick fix for that. A warm light in the evening, a cool light during work hours. That's it. Your mood will shift within days, trust me. Number three, window placement and the direction of natural light. This one is huge and almost nobody talks about it. Morning light entering from the east literally activates your cortisol awakening response. That's the natural spike that helps you feel alert and motivated in the morning. Western light in the evening supports melatonin production and wind down. If your bedroom window faces west and you're waking up groggy every day, part of that is because your room never gets the morning signal. Your body's internal clock is waiting for a sunrise cue that the architecture is unfortunately blocking in this scenario. This is not small. The research on seasonal affective disorder and circadian entrainment shows that light timing is one of the most powerful mood regulators we have. And your window is the delivery system. Can change your windows? Get a light therapy lamp. 10 to 20 minutes of bright morning light and you'll feel a shift within a week. Again, this isn't motivational advice, bro. This is space design, so trust me on this. Number four, clutter visibility. And I'm not talking about the mess the way your mother talks about it. This is different. When your eyes scan a surface, and I mean any surface, your brain does this instant automatic check. Does this need my attention? Is this mine? Should I do something about it? A clear surface gets a quick pass. A cluttered surface gets multiple checks, multiple micro decisions, all happening before you've had a single conscious thought about it. I talked about this in my other video, but here's the part I didn't cover. It's not just about the number of objects, it's about how many unresolved objects your eyes land on. An organized shelf with 20 items, fine, your brain files it as just one shelf. A desk with 5 items that each carry an open task, that's 5 background processes running simultaneously. That's your battery, that's your mood draining before you even start your day. The test is simple. Does your eye rest on it or work on it? Keep the first kind, everything else is optional. Number 5, the proximity of your bed to your workspace. I covered a context collapse in my last video when one room tries to be everything and your brain can't commit to any single mode. But here's the specific mechanism. When your bed is visible from your desk, your brain is receiving 2 competing behavior cues simultaneously: work and rest. It can fully commit to either one, so it commits to neither. This is literally the same mechanism as putting your phone on your desk while trying to study, let's say. The phone doesn't have to necessarily buzz. Its presence alone is a cue. The bed doesn't have to be comfortable. It's the same thing here. Its visibility is the cue. Your brain registers it as an available option, let's say, and allocates attention to it. So you just need to constantly, not necessarily to look, it just gives you the signal. So what is the fix here? If you can't move the desk or the bed, just block the line of sight, let's say. A bookshelf, a curtain, even a tall plant, anything that removes the bed from your visual field while you work. You just feel the difference the same day, and I'm not even exaggerating it. Number 6, and this is the one nobody expects: room, fragrance, and olfactory cues. Your olfactory system, your sense of smell, is the only sense that connects directly to your amygdala and hippocampus. That's your emotional memory center. Every other sense goes through the thalamus first, which is like a relay station. Smell bypasses it entirely. A scent hits your emotional brain before your rational brain even knows it's there. This means that whatever your room smells like, and I don't mean necessarily perfume or cologne or whatever, I mean the baseline smell of your space, that scent is attaching itself to your emotional state constantly. Mostly cellular, your brain links it to stagnation. Fresh, clean, maybe a hint of cedar or citrus, your brain links it to alertness and calm. Research from the Journal of Environmental Psychology found that exposure to natural scents like pine and citrus measurably reduce perceived stress and improves mood. Not imagine, these are real, measured. Cortisol levels dropped, heart rate variability improved. That's your room working on you through your nose, and you never even notice. Let me give you a quick hack about it. Open your bedroom's window for 10 minutes every morning. Let the air exchange. Then add one natural scent. I'm not talking about one of these synthetic air freshener. Those are terrible. Something real, a plant, essential oil, fresh herb. Your brain will start associating your room with freshening instead of whatever it's been cooking, marinating it in. Number 7. Furniture arrangements, and more specifically what I call social geometry. The way your furniture shapes how you and other people interact in the space, that's what I'm talking about. This is one of the most studied areas in environmental psychology and one of the most ignored in actual homes where we're living. When seats face each other directly, conversation instantly goes up. When they're at a 90-degree angle, the conversation feels easier, more natural, or let's say less confrontational. When seats all face a screen, social interactions drops almost to zero. The furniture literally programs the behavior here. Think about your living room right now. If every seat points at the TV, your room is designed for consumption, not connection. If you rotate every one chair to face the rest of the room, you've changed the social geometry. People will talk more. It's not a social skill thing, bro. It's a spatial cue thing. Research by environmental psychologist Humphrey Osmond back in the 1950s coined 2 terms, which I'm terrible. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right or wrong. Sociopetal spaces. It's basically for the layouts that pull people toward interaction, and social fugal spaces, layouts that push people apart. Hospital waiting rooms, social fugal. The second one, rows of chairs all facing the wall, a cozy cafe with small round tables, social pearl. The first kind. Your living room, I don't know, depends on when your couch points. I told you about it. You don't need to redesign your apartment, just move one chair. That's the lever. One chair, different angle, different behavior. Simple, right? So, 7 design choices: ceiling height, light temperature, window direction, clutter visibility, bed proximity, room scent, and furniture arrangement. None of these are expensive, none require renovation, most of them require moving one thing or noticing one thing you've been ignoring. Let's be honest here. And here's what connects all of them. Your brain is never not reading your environment. It's never off. Every moment you're in a room, your nervous system is processing the spatial cues and turning them into mood, focus, energy, or fatigue. You just never had a name for it. So you called it laziness or burned out or bad day or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of time it was just a room. The psychology of human behavior doesn't just live inside you, it lives in the space around you as well. And the moment you start designing that space with intention instead of just existing in, literally, everything shifts. If this changed how you see your room, let me know in the comments. Which of these 7 was the one that you felt the most? I'm genuinely curious to know. And if you want more of how your space is shaping you, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.